Before the official chronicles of Chinese history were ever recorded, in the vast lands stretching from the Yellow River to the Yangtze, there existed stories passed down through countless generations. This was an age when the line between myth and history was blurred, a time of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, semi-divine rulers who were both human and godlike, laying the foundations for the civilization we now call China. The 3 sovereigns, founders of civilization ancient Chinese, believed that their earliest ancestors descended from 3 extraordinary beings known as the 3 sovereigns, Fuxi Nuwa and Shanong. Some traditions replace Shanong with Siren, or the Yellow Emperor. Fuxi, the first sovereign, is said to have taught people how to hunt, fish, domesticate animals, and, most famously, to have invented the 8 trigrams, a symbolic system for divination, regarded as the precursor to the I Ching. Beside him stood Nuwa, a goddess with the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a serpent, who not only created humankind from yellow clay, but also saved the world in the famed tale of Patching the Sky. When the heavens cracked open, she melted stones of 5 colors to seal the gap, shielding the earth from catastrophe. Shanong, the 3rd sovereign, is remembered as the father of agriculture. He taught the people to cultivate crops, establish markets, and identify medicinal plants. In legend, he personally tasted hundreds of herbs, sometimes suffering fatal poisonings, so that others could know their effects. His sacrifice symbolizes the spirit of giving one's life for the well-being of the community. The 5 emperors, wise rulers of antiquity. Following the 3 sovereigns came the 5 emperors, revered as wise rulers who governed through virtue. The Yellow Emperor Huangdi, circa 2698–2598 BC, is regarded as the progenitor of the Waxia people. He defeated the warlord Chu, leader of a powerful nomadic tribe, in the Battle of Jualu, uniting major clans. During his reign, the earliest forms of chariots, bows, and a rudimentary calendar appeared. Emperor Zhuangshu and Emperor Ku succeeded him, strengthening order through the establishment of rituals and religious norms. Emperor Yao and Emperor Shun became legendary for their moral integrity. They treated ruling the realm as caring for one's family, and they valued merit over bloodline. In a remarkable tradition known as Shan Rang, virtuous abdication, they passed the throne not to their sons but to the most capable individuals. Yu the Great. Taming the floods. Among the most famous legends of early China is that of Yu the Great. Before Yu, the Yellow River and other great waterways frequently flooded, devastating farmland and settlements. Yu's father Gun had tried to stop the floods by building dikes, but failed. Learning from this, Yu adopted a different approach. Instead of blocking the water, he channeled it to the sea through an intricate network of canals. It is said that in the 13 years he labored, he passed his home 3 times without entering, so devoted was he to his work. His success not only saved the people from disaster, but also marked the shift from tribal alliances to the earliest form of a centralized state. The birth of the Yellow River civilization during the time of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. The Waxia tribes began forming the core elements of Chinese civilization. Millet agriculture thrived in the fertile Loess plains of the Yellow River. Pottery and bronze tools emerged, enabling better storage and stronger weapons. Rituals and ancestor worship became the heart of social life, reinforcing community identity. Language and symbols began to develop, paving the way for the birth of writing. From myth to recorded history, modern archaeologists believe these myths reflect a collective memory of humanity's transition in East Asia, from hunting to farming, from scattered clans to organized communities. Chapter 1 closes as the great tribes begin forming proto-states, setting the stage for the Xia dynasty, the first dynasty recorded in Chinese history, marking the passage from the age of myth into the era of written history. The legend of Yu the Great did not end with the taming of the floods. His mastery over the waters had not only saved countless lives, but it also elevated him to a position of unrivaled respect among the tribes of the Yellow River Basin. In an age where power was earned through deeds rather than inherited titles, Yu stood as the natural choice to lead a newly unified realm. Yet what followed would mark a turning point in Chinese history, the founding of the Xia dynasty, the first royal house to be recorded in Chinese historiography. Yu the Great, and the birth of a dynasty, according to ancient chronicles like the Bamboo Annals and records of the Grand Historian. Yu succeeded Emperor Shun through the traditional system of Shan rank succession by merit, but unlike his virtuous predecessors, Yu broke with tradition when, instead of abdicating in favor of the most capable outsider, he passed the throne to his own son, Qi. This single act transformed the leadership model from elective succession to hereditary monarchy, marking the birth of dynastic rule. This change was revolutionary. It established the idea of a ruling family with divine legitimacy, supported by both political authority and spiritual reverence. The Xia dynasty, though semi-legendary in the eyes of modern scholars, thus stands at the crossroads of myth and history, a transitional era in which oral tradition began to merge with proto-historical record-keeping. The land and its people. The Xia realm stretched across fertile valleys of the Middle and Lower Yellow River. Agriculture was the backbone of its economy, with millet as the staple crop. Bronzeworking was in its infancy, but stone and bone tools still dominated daily life. The people lived in walled settlements with thatched houses, organized into clans bound by kinship and loyalty to the ruling family. Society was hierarchical. At the top stood the king, descended from Yu, followed by nobles who managed regional territories. Below them were craftsmen, farmers, and laborers. Shamans and priests held an important place, mediating between the human world and the spirits, ensuring good harvests and protection from floods. Rituals, beliefs, and the Car rulers, inheriting Yu's reputation as a sage king, used ritual to reinforce their authority. Seasonal ceremonies were held to honor heaven, earth, and the ancestors. These were not mere religious acts, they were political theater, binding the people to the ruling family through a shared cosmic order. The flood control systems initiated by Yu continued to expand. Dikes, channels, and embankments were maintained not only for practical reasons, but as a symbol of the ruler's duty to tame nature for the prosperity of the people. In the IHI worldview, a king's legitimacy came from his ability to maintain harmony between heaven, earth, and humanity, a philosophy that would endure for millennia in Chinese political thought. The reign of King Qi and his successors. King Qi, Yu's son, faced early challenges. His accession had angered some chieftains who saw it as a betrayal of the Shanrang tradition. Rebellions flared, most notably from the Yu tribe. Qi responded decisively, defeating the rebels at the Battle of Gan. His victory cemented the hereditary system, but it also signaled a shift toward more centralized and militarized governance. The generations that followed saw alternating periods of strength and decline. Some Xia rulers were celebrated for their wisdom and justice, others condemned for tyranny and extravagance. This pattern, the rise of virtuous kings, followed by corrupt successors, would repeat throughout Chinese history, becoming almost a moral cycle in the cultural imagination. Material culture and archaeological echoes. For centuries, the Xia dynasty was thought to be purely mythical. However, excavations in the late 20th century at Erlitou, in Henan province, revealed an advanced Bronze Age culture dating roughly to the AGA period. Large palatial structures, bronze vessels, jade ornaments, and evidence of urban planning suggest a complex and centralized society. While historians still debate whether Erlitou was truly the Xia capital, the discovery bridges the gap between legend and historical plausibility. These archaeological finds also reveal the emergence of early Chinese craftsmanship, elegant bronze ritual vessels, intricate jade carvings symbolizing power and purity, and pottery decorated with geometric patterns. Such artifacts suggest a culture already rich in symbolism and artistry. The fall of the Xia, the dynasty's final ruler, King Ji, is remembered in the annals as a tyrant, arrogant, indulgent, and cruel. Tales depict him building opulent palaces, draining the treasury, and neglecting the people's suffering. His reign was marked by natural disasters, which were interpreted as signs that heaven had withdrawn its mandate. The mandate of heaven, a belief that rulers governed only with divine approval, would become a central justification for regime change in later dynasties. It was during Ji's reign that a powerful chieftain named Tang of the Shang tribe rose in rebellion. Tang's forces defeated Ji at the Battle of Ming Chinese, a confrontation fought under stormy skies, which chroniclers described as heaven itself aiding the righteous. Ji fled into exile, and the Xia dynasty, after some 4 centuries of rule, came to an end. Legacy of the Xia. Though the Xia dynasty remains shrouded in the mists of legend, its legacy is profound. It represents the first step toward centralized monarchy, the institutionalization of hereditary succession, and the intertwining of political authority with divine sanction. The ideals and failures of its rulers became moral lessons for later generations, that a king must protect his people, govern with virtue, and uphold harmony with the natural world. As the Shire faded into memory, the Shang dynasty rose from its ashes, ushering in a new era defined by bronze mastery, oracle bones, and a flourishing of early Chinese culture. But the image of Yu the Great, striding through the floodwaters, remained etched in the Chinese consciousness as the archetype of the ruler who served the people above himself. With the fall of the Shire dynasty, the mandate of heaven passed into the hands of Tang of Shang, a leader whose virtue and strategic skill marked the beginning of one of ancient China's most remarkable dynasties. The Shang dynasty, lasting over 5 centuries, would see the consolidation of early Chinese statehood, the refinement of bronze technology, and the first known system of writing in East Asia etched, not on paper, but on bone and shell. Tang of Shang and the just conquest. Tang's rise was as much moral as it was military. Chroniclers described him as a leader who dressed simply, spoke humbly, and governed with compassion. Under his rule, the Shang capital at Bo became a center of order and prosperity. His victory over the tyrant Ji of Shire at the Battle of Ming was framed not merely as a political triumph, but as a righteous act, proof that heaven's favor could be withdrawn from corrupt rulers and bestowed upon the just. This moral framework, the mandate of heaven, was not only a spiritual concept, but a political doctrine. It would justify the rise and fall of dynasties for the next 3,000 years. The expanding realm over generations, Shang kings expanded their control across the Yellow River Plain. Their influence reached as far north as modern-day Hubei, south into Anhui, and east toward the Shanding Peninsula. The kingdom was organized into a network of walled cities, each ruled by a local noble who pledged allegiance and tribute to the king. Trade and tribute brought exotic goods to the Shang court: jade from distant mountains, shells from coastal tribes, and cattle from the steppe. These exchanges not only enriched the dynasty, but also connected disparate cultures into an early Chinese cultural sphere. Bronze, the metal of kings, the Shang were master metallurgists. Their bronze vessels, weapons, and tools were unrivaled in craftsmanship. Ritual vessels such as Ding cauldrons and Jiyu wine cups were cast in elaborate shapes, decorated with the mysterious Taoti mask motif, ferocious, symmetrical faces whose meaning remains debated. Some scholars see them as protective spirits, others as representations of ancestral power. Bronze was not merely utilitarian, it was political and spiritual. Only the king and the elite could commission large-scale castings, reinforcing their authority. Weapons of bronze gave Shang armies a technological edge, while ceremonial vessels embodied the dynasty's connection to heaven and the ancestors. The world of spirits and ancestors. No civilization before the Shang left such vivid evidence of ancestor worship. The Shang believed their deceased forebears continued to influence the living, interceding with the gods on behalf of their descendants. The king, as both ruler and high priest, conducted elaborate rituals to honor these spirits. In great ceremonies, wine and food were offered to ancestral tablets. Bronze vessels were filled with sacrificial meats, and music resounded through the temple halls. These acts were not symbolic alone. They were thought to ensure good harvests, military success, and protection from calamity. The oracle bones, voices from the past. Perhaps the Shang dynasty's most enduring legacy is its system of writing. Preserved on oracle bones, the shoulder blades of oxen, or the plastron's underside shells of turtles, kings would pose questions to their ancestors and the gods. Should we wage war? Will the harvest be plentiful? Should the queen bear a child? Diviners would carve these questions into the bone or shell, apply heat until cracks formed, and interpret the patterns as answers. These inscriptions represent the earliest known form of Chinese writing, remarkably similar to modern Chinese characters. They record not only divine consultations, but also eclipses, weather patterns, and royal genealogies. Through them, the Shang speak to us across more than 3,000 years, their concerns at once distant and strangely familiar. Life in the Shang realm. The Shang population was diverse. Nobles, artisans, farmers, and slaves. Nobles lived in walled compounds, wore fine silk, and oversaw armies. Artisans crafted bronzes, jade ornaments, and pottery. Farmers tilled millet fields with wooden plows, while slaves often wore captives labored in workshops, or were offered as human sacrifices in royal tombs. Hunting, archery, and chariot warfare were essential skills for the elite. Archaeological finds reveal chariots with spoked wheels, drawn by horses imported from Central Asia, revolutionary military technology for the time. The glory and decline. While many Shang kings ruled wisely, some succumbed to extravagance and tyranny. The dynasty's last ruler, King Zhou of Shang, is infamous in legend for his cruelty and indulgence. He built the extravagant Deer Terrace Pavilion, lavished wealth upon his concubine Doji, and imposed heavy burdens on the people. Rebellion stirred. In the west, the Zhou tribe, led by King Wu, rallied disaffected nobles and tribes. In 1046 BCE, at the Battle of Mai, Zhou forces vastly outnumbered, defeated the Shang army, many of whose soldiers defected mid-battle. King Zhou retreated to his palace and, refusing capture, set it ablaze, ending the Shang dynasty. The Shang legacy. The Shang left behind a civilization rich in artistry, ritual, and political sophistication. They gave China its first written language, codified the intertwining of governance and religion, and elevated ancestor worship into a defining cultural pillar. Their bronze artistry remains a marvel of human craftsmanship, and their oracle bones provide the earliest historical record of China. The Zhou who replaced them would claim the mandate of heaven, ushering in a new political philosophy that justified righteous rebellion and demanded moral virtue from kings. But even as dynasties rose and fell, the echoes of the Shang, the clang of bronze, the smoke of sacrifice, the crack of burning oracle shells would haunt the halls of Chinese history forever. The fall of the Shang at the Battle of Mai was more than a change of rulers. It was a shift in the very philosophy of kingship. The victors, the Zhou clan from the fertile Wei River Valley, claimed not merely to have conquered the Shang, they had been chosen by heaven itself to replace them. Thus emerged one of the most enduring doctrines in Chinese political thought, the mandate of heaven. The mandate of heaven. A new political vision. King Wu of Zhou declared that heaven grants authority to just and virtuous rulers, but can revoke it when they become corrupt. This doctrine justified his rebellion against the Shang, and would echo through every dynastic transition in Chinese history. But King Wu's triumph was short-lived. He died only a few years after the conquest, leaving his young son on the throne. The real power passed to the Duke of Zhou, Wu's brother, who acted as regent, a man of vision and discipline. The Duke of Zhou suppressed rebellions by Shang loyalists, consolidated Zhou control, and established a new political order, the feudal system. To govern their vast territories, the Zhou devised a feudal structure. The king, ruling from his capital at Haiyojing, granted land to relatives and trusted nobles, who became lords of semi-autonomous states. In return, they pledged loyalty, military service, and tribute to the king. This system, called Fenjian, mirrored a giant family hierarchy. The king was the patriarch, the lords his sons and brothers. Below them were ministers, warriors, farmers, and artisans. At the bottom were slaves, often war captives. The system fostered stability, at least at first, by binding rulers and lords through bloodlines and ritual obligations. Ritual and order. The Zhou court placed extraordinary emphasis on rightly ceremonial norms, governing everything from seasonal sacrifices to the conduct of war. These rituals reinforced social hierarchy and the cosmic order, ensuring that heaven, earth, and humanity remained in balance. The Zhou kings also standardized weights, measures, and even aspects of language to unify their realm. They encouraged agriculture, expanded irrigation, and introduced iron tools in later centuries, which increased food production and population growth. The Eastern Zhou and the decline of royal power for the first 2 centuries, known as the Western Zhou period, 1046 to 771 BCE, the dynasty thrived. But over time, the feudal lords grew powerful, while the central court weakened. In 771 BCE, disaster struck. The capital was sacked by invading tribes from the west, aided by rebellious vassals. The Zhou court fled east to the city of Luoyang. This marked the beginning of the Eastern Zhou period, 772 to 56 BCE. In the east, the Zhou kings retained their titles but little real authority. The lords of the various states, Qin, Ku, Qin, Lu, and others acted as independent rulers. The land was nominally one realm, but in practice it had fractured into dozens of competing powers. The Spring and Autumn Era, 772 for 76 BCE. This era takes its name from the Spring and Autumn Annals, a chronicle traditionally attributed to Confucius. It was an age of shifting alliances, diplomatic intrigue, and near-constant warfare between the feudal states. Despite the turmoil, the Spring and Autumn era was a golden age of intellectual and cultural flowering. Philosophers, strategists, and reformers emerged in abundance. Confucius Kongzi of the state of Lu taught ethics, proper conduct, and the moral duty of rulers to govern with benevolence. Laozi, a contemporary or near-contemporary, laid the foundations of Taoism, advocating harmony with the Tao, the natural way of the universe. Sun Tzu, the strategist from the state of Wu, composed The Art of War, a treatise on military strategy still studied worldwide. The period also saw innovations in administration and military affairs, the spread of iron tools and weapons, the use of cavalry, and the rise of professional bureaucracies. Hegemons and the struggle for supremacy with the Zhou kings weakened. Power shifted to Ba. Hegemons, strong rulers who claimed to act in the king's name but pursued their own dominance. The most famous was Duke Wan of Qi, guided by his chancellor Guanzhong, who forged alliances to repel barbarian invasions and temporarily restore order. Yet these alliances rarely lasted. Rival states vied for supremacy, their conflicts laying the groundwork for the even more violent warring states period to come. Legacy of the Zhou and the Spring and Autumn era. The Zhou dynasty's political philosophy, especially the Mandate of Heaven, became a permanent fixture in Chinese statecraft. Its feudal system fostered local autonomy and cultural diversity, but also sowed the seeds of fragmentation. The emphasis on ritual, moral governance, and education left a cultural legacy that endured long after the dynasty's decline. By the close of the Spring and Autumn period, the Zhou king was a figurehead, and the feudal states were powerful, ambitious, and ready to fight for dominance. The stage was set for the warring states period, an age of unprecedented bloodshed, but also of extraordinary innovation. The close of the Spring and Autumn era marked a shift in the scale and ferocity of conflict. Alliances had crumbled, the Zhou king had become a powerless figurehead, and the once fragmented feudal landscape began consolidating into a handful of powerful states. This was the dawn of the warring states period, an age of relentless warfare, diplomatic maneuvering, and profound transformation, when China's destiny as a unified empire was forged in blood. From many to 7 by the mid-5th century BCE, more than 100 feudal domains had merged or been absorbed into 7 major powers. Qin in the far west, a rugged land of disciplined warriors. Ku in the fertile south, vast and culturally diverse. Qi in the northeast, a hub of commerce and innovation. Yan in the north, guarding against nomadic incursions. Han, Zhao, and Wei, 3 successor states of the once mighty Jin. These 7 states were locked in a brutal contest for supremacy, each striving to become the sole ruler of all under heaven. The age of reform and innovation. Despite the constant wars, this was also a time of political and military revolution. States that clung to old aristocratic privilege fell behind. Those that embraced reform rose rapidly. The most radical transformation came in Qin, under the guidance of Shangyang, appointed chancellor in the 4th century BCE. Shangyang dismantled the old feudal order and implemented legalist principles, merit over birth, promotions based on military and administrative achievement, not noble lineage, strict laws and harsh punishments, ensuring discipline and obedience, agricultural primacy, rewarding farmers and soldiers over merchants and aristocrats. These reforms turned Qin into a disciplined, efficient war machine. Elsewhere, military innovations transformed the battlefield. Iron weapons replaced bronze, crossbows gave infantry deadly ranged power. Cavalry replaced chariots as the dominant mobile force. States built massive fortifications and engaged in large-scale conscription, fielding armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands. The 100 schools of thought. Even as war raged, intellectual life flourished. The warring states period saw the peak of the 100 schools of thought. Confucianism, emphasizing moral leadership and benevolent rule. Taoism, advocating harmony with nature and minimal interference. Legalism, favoring centralized control and strict law. Mohism, founded by Mozi, promoting universal love and defensive warfare. School of diplomacy, whose strategists manipulated alliances in a game of shifting loyalties. Philosophers traveled from court to court, offering their ideas to kings hungry for any advantage. The fall of the Zhou royal house lingered in name only. The last Zhou kings could not even defend their own capital without aid from rival states. In 256 BCE, Qin annexed the Zhou territory outright, ending a dynasty that had once ruled all of China for over 800 years. Yet the Zhou's legacy, the mandate of heaven, ritual culture, and moral philosophy, would outlast their political power. The rise of Qin. By the late 3rd century BCE, Qin had emerged as the most formidable of the seven. Its kings pursued a relentless strategy, isolate rivals through diplomatic manipulation, strike decisively against the weakest enemy at the right moment, absorb territory, and resettle populations to secure control. Qin's location gave it natural defenses: mountains to the west, rivers to the east, and access to the Wei River Valley's fertile lands. It also drew on the fierce martial traditions of its frontier people, blending them with legalist administration. The Wars of Unification. King Zheng of Qin, who would later become Qin Shi Huang, ascended the throne in 246 BCE. In just over 2 decades, he and his generals systematically destroyed the other 6 states. Han fell first in 230 BCE, its small size no match for Qin's might. Zhao collapsed in 228 BCE after years of war. Yan fell in 226 BCE despite a desperate assassination attempt against Zheng was crushed in 225 BCE. Sakchu, the largest state, fought fiercely but was defeated in 223 BCE. Qi, isolated and leaderless, surrendered without a fight in 221 BCE for the first time in history. The lands of the Yellow and Yangtze rivers were united under one ruler. The birth of an empire. In 221 BCE, King Zhang declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin. He rejected the title of king, claiming that his power surpassed all previous rulers. The warring states period was over. China was now a centralized empire. Qin Shi Huang abolished the feudal system, replacing it with direct imperial rule through provinces and commanderies. He standardized weights, measures, currency, and writing, binding the diverse regions into a single political entity. Massive infrastructure projects including roads and the first version of the Great Wall linked the empire's far reaches. The legacy of the Warring States. The Warring States was an era of unparalleled violence, but it also forged the tools of empire: efficient administration, advanced military technology, and the philosophical foundations of governance. It was a crucible in which the Chinese identity was tempered, producing the political unity that would define the nation for millennia. Yet the unification under Qin was only the beginning. Ahead lay both the glories and perils of empire, an experiment in centralized power that would change the course of Chinese history forever. In the year 221 BCE, King Zhang of Qin stood victorious over the shattered remnants of the Warring States. At the age of 38, he declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin, announcing to the world that his power surpassed that of any king before him. This was no mere change of title. It was a declaration of a new political order. For the first time in history, the lands of the Yellow and Yangtze rivers, the mountains of the west, and the eastern seacoasts were united under a single ruler. A new order. Qin Shi Huang was determined that the chaos of the warring states would never return. To achieve this, he dismantled the feudal system entirely. The empire was divided into 36 commanderies, each governed by officials appointed by the emperor himself, not by hereditary lords. These officials were rotated frequently to prevent them from building local power bases. The administration was run according to legalist principles, a strict code of laws applied equally to all, backed by severe punishments. Loyalty was not to a clan or region, but to the state and the emperor. In Qin's ideology, virtue lay in obedience and productivity, not in noble birth, standardizing the empire to bind his vast empire together. Qin Shi Huang launched a sweeping program of standardization. Weights and measures were unified to ensure fair trade. Axle widths of carts were standardized so that roads would fit all vehicles. Currency was standardized into round bronze coins with square holes. Written script was unified, creating a common written language across the empire, even for those who spoke different dialects. These measures allowed distant regions to interact more easily, reducing barriers to commerce, administration, and communication. Monumental projects. The emperor poured immense resources into infrastructure and defense. Road networks spanning thousands of kilometers linked the empire's commanderies, enabling the rapid movement of armies and officials. The Great Wall, emerging an extension of existing fortifications, was built to guard against northern nomads. Hundreds of thousands of laborers worked under brutal conditions, many perishing in the process. Massive irrigation works and canals improved agriculture and transportation. While these projects showcased the might of the Qin state, they also placed a heavy burden on the population, fueling resentment. Control of thought. Qin Shi Huang sought not only to unify territory, but also to control ideas. Alarmed by the potential for dissent, he ordered the burning of books in 213 BC, except those on agriculture, medicine, and legalist law. Confucian classics and histories of rival states were destroyed, and scholars who defied the edict were executed or exiled. This act, known as the burning of books and burying of scholars, became a symbol of Qin's authoritarian rule. The aim was to erase alternative sources of political legitimacy and ensure that the emperor's ideology was the only one permitted. The emperor's obsession with immortality as he aged, Qin Shi Huang became increasingly obsessed with the fear of death. He dispatched expeditions across land and sea in search of the elixir of life, sending envoys to mythical islands said to hold immortal beings. Ironically, the potions he consumed containing mercury may have hastened his decline. In preparation for eternity, he commissioned the construction of a vast underground mausoleum near modern Xi'an, guarded by the infamous Terracotta Army, thousands of life-size soldiers, horses, and chariots, each uniquely crafted to protect him in the afterlife. The emperor's death and collapse of the dynasty. In 210 BCE, while touring the eastern provinces, Qin Shi Huang died suddenly. His death was kept secret during the journey back to the capital, as ministers feared unrest. In a palace intrigue, his trusted advisor Li Si and court eunuch Xiao Gao altered the succession, installing the weak second emperor, Qin Shi, without the first emperor's iron will. The system he had built began to crumble. Harsh laws, heavy taxes, and forced labor had bred deep resentment among the people. In 209 BCE, a small uprising by two soldiers, Chun Shang and Wu Guang, ignited a wave of rebellions. Former nobles, peasants, and rival warlords rose against Qin rule. By 206 BCE, the Qin capital had fallen to the forces of Liu Bang, a peasant-turned-general who would go on to found the Han dynasty. The Qin Empire, which had taken decades of conquest to build, collapsed in just 15 years. Legacy of Qin. Though short-lived, the Qin dynasty left a profound and lasting mark. The idea of a centralized bureaucratic empire became the model for all subsequent dynasties. Standardized language, currency, and measurement systems endured for millennia. Monumental projects like the Great Wall and national roadways demonstrated the power and danger of unified labor. The Qin had proven that China could be ruled as a single state. The challenge for those who followed would be to temper absolute power with a measure of compassion, lest the unity they achieved be consumed by the very force that built it. When the fires of rebellion consumed the short-lived Qin Empire, two leaders emerged from the chaos. Shang Yu, a brilliant but impulsive warlord from Ku, and Liu Bang, a former peasant and minor official whose pragmatism and political skill would prove decisive. After years of bloody rivalry in what historians call the Kachahon contention, Liu Bang triumphed in 202 BCE. He proclaimed himself Emperor Gaozu of Han, founding a dynasty that would rule China for over 4 centuries and set the standard for imperial governance for millennia. From harsh law to benevolent rule, Gaozu understood the resentment that had destroyed the Qin. While he retained the centralized administrative system and standardized measures introduced by Qin Shi Huang, he abandoned the harshest elements of legalism, guided by advisors who blended legalist efficiency with Confucian ideals. The early Han sought to lighten the burden on the people. Taxes were reduced, forced labor was limited, harsh punishments were softened, exiles were recalled to serve in government. This blend of central authority and humane governance won popular support and stabilized the empire. The Han government machine. The Han perfected the bureaucratic system that became the backbone of Chinese governance. For 2,000 years, officials were appointed based on meritat, least in theory and educated in the Confucian classics. Over time, the study of these texts became the pathway to officialdom, embedding Confucian values of loyalty, morality, and order into the state's ideology. The empire was divided into provinces and commanderies, each with civilian administrators, military commanders, and inspectors to ensure loyalty to the emperor. This system allowed the Han to govern a vast territory stretching from Korea in the northeast to Vietnam in the south. Han, Wudi, and the zenith of power. The dynasty reached its greatest strength under Emperor Wuhan Wudi, who reigned from 141 to 87 BCE. His reign was marked by bold expansion, military campaigns, and economic reform. In the north, his generals defeated the nomadic Zhongnu, pushing them beyond the Gobi Desert. In the south, he extended Han influence into modern Vietnam and Guangdong. In the west, he sent envoys like Zhong Qian to explore Central Asia, paving the way for the Silk Road, which linked China to India, Persia, and Rome. Wudi also centralized economic control, establishing state monopolies over salt, iron, and liquor, and implementing grain storage systems to stabilize prices. The Silk Road and cultural exchange. The Silk Road became a conduit not only for goods but for ideas and cultures. Chinese silk, lacquerware, and porcelain traveled west, while horses, glassware, and exotic spices flowed in from Central Asia. Along these routes, Buddhism made its first hesitant steps into China, carried by monks and merchants. Caravans braved deserts, mountains, and bandits, but the rewards were immense. The Han capital Chang'an became one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the world, a cosmopolitan hub where traders from far lands mingled in its markets. Science, technology, and culture. The Han era was a time of remarkable innovation. Paper was invented during the Eastern Han, revolutionizing record-keeping and literature. Seismographs detected distant earthquakes. Advances in astronomy allowed more accurate calendars. Medical texts recorded herbal remedies and acupuncture techniques still used today. Confucian scholars compiled histories, most notably Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian, which chronicled China from mythical times to the Han era with unprecedented scope and detail. Challenges and decline. Despite its prosperity, the Han faced recurring threats. Corruption and eunuch dominance in court politics weakened central authority. Powerful families accumulated vast estates, evading taxes. Heavy military spending strained the treasury. Natural disasters and famines fueled peasant unrest. One of the most significant uprisings was the Yellow Turban Rebellion in 184 CE, a massive religiously inspired revolt that shook the empire. Although suppressed, it left the Han gravely weakened. The end of the Han. By the late 2nd century CE, the court was paralyzed by factional strife. Warlords rose in the provinces, ignoring imperial orders. In 220 CE, the last Han emperor, a powerless figurehead, abdicated to Cao Pai, marking the official end of the dynasty and the beginning of the Three Kingdoms era. The Han legacy. The Han dynasty's influence is so enduring that even today, the majority ethnic group in China calls itself the Han people. The dynasty's blend of centralized power, Confucian moral governance, technological innovation, and cultural achievement became the model for all future Chinese states. The Han had shown that an empire could be both strong and cultured, disciplined yet humane, a vision that would inspire rulers for centuries. But their fall was a reminder that even the greatest dynasties could crumble when unity gave way to ambition. When the Han dynasty finally fell in 220 CE, it left behind not a unified successor but a fractured realm. Ambitious warlords, regional governors, and former Han generals carved out their own territories, each claiming the right to restore order under heaven. What followed was one of the most turbulent, yet culturally celebrated periods in Chinese history, the Three Kingdoms era. The birth of three rival states. The collapse of Han authority was not sudden, it had been years in the making. By the late 2nd century, the imperial court in Luoyang was paralyzed by eunuch dominance and factional infighting. Into this vacuum stepped Cao Cao, a shrewd general and master strategist. By consolidating the north, he became the most powerful warlord in China. Though he never declared himself emperor, his son Cao Pai would do so in 220 CE, establishing the state of Wei in the north. In the southwest, Liu Bei, a distant relative of the Han imperial family, positioned himself as the legitimate heir to Han's legacy. Charismatic and benevolent, Liu Bei gathered loyal allies, most famously the strategist Zhuge Liang. In 221 CE, he proclaimed the state of Shuhan. In the southeast, Sun Quan inherited a stable power base from his brother Sun Ce, ruling over the rich and fertile lands of the lower Yangtze. His state, Wu, prospered through trade, agriculture, and strong naval forces. Thus, China was split into Wei North, Shu West, and Wu South, three kingdoms locked in an uneasy balance of power. The Battle of Red Cliffs, 208 CE, the event that defined the early Three Kingdoms era, had occurred even before the formal division. In 208 CE, Cao Cao, fresh from unifying the north, marched south with an army claimed to number 800,000, likely exaggerated, but still vast. His goal was to crush the southern warlords and reunify China. At the Battle of Red Cliffs, an unlikely alliance of Liu Bei and Sun Quan stood in his way. Under the command of Zhou Yuwu, and aided by clever deception from Zhuge Liang Shu, the Allies used fireships to burn Cao Cao's fleet on the Yangtze River. The defeat forced Cao Cao to retreat north, cementing the tripartite division of the realm. Warfare and strategy. The Three Kingdoms era was a time of constant military maneuvering, where armies clashed in set-piece battles, cunning ambushes, and protracted sieges. Fortified cities became critical strategic points, and river control determined the outcome of campaigns. Generals like Xiao Yun, Guan Yu, Zhong Fei, and Lu Meng became legendary for their bravery and tactical brilliance. The era's warfare was immortalized in later literature, blending historical fact with heroic legend. The mind of Zhuge Liang. No figure embodies the intellectual spirit of the era more than Zhuge Liang, the Chancellor of Shu, renowned as a master of strategy, diplomacy, and governance. He sought to restore the Han through calculated military campaigns against Wei. His northern expeditions 228 to 234 CE showcased both his brilliance and the limits of Shu's resources. Despite early successes, he could not break Wei's dominance, and he died in camp in 234 CE, his final campaign unfinished. Life amidst chaos while war dominated politics. Daily life for ordinary people was a mix of hardship and adaptation. Farmers endured heavy conscription and taxes. Refugees fled war zones, settling in safer territories or serving in military colonies. Yet in Wu and parts of Shu, relative stability allowed for economic growth, especially through rice cultivation and river trade. Culturally, the period saw the rise of refined poetry, calligraphy, and historical writing, even amid war. The famed physician Hu Tu developed surgical techniques and herbal remedies that would influence Chinese medicine for centuries. The fall of the Three-No Kingdom could hold dominance for long. Shu fell first in 263 CE, when Wei's armies overwhelmed its defenses. In 265 CE, the powerful general Sima Yan usurped the Wei throne, founding the Qin dynasty. Finally, in 280 CE, the Jin launched a massive riverine invasion of Wu, forcing Sun Hao, the last Wu emperor, to surrender. For the first time since the Han's collapse, China was reunified, but only briefly, as new cycles of division and war would soon return. The legacy of the Three Kingdoms. Though lasting only 60 years, the Three Kingdoms captured the Chinese imagination for centuries. Tales of loyalty, betrayal, cunning, and valor were woven into the romance of the Three Kingdoms, one of China's four great classical novels. The era's heroes and strategists became cultural icons, their deeds celebrated in opera, literature, and popular culture. The period stands as a testament to both the fragility of unity and the enduring human drive to restore it. Drama played out on battlefields, in palace, halls, and in the hearts of those who dreamed of all under heaven united once more. The unification of China under the Qin dynasty in 280 CE seemed to promise an end to centuries of division. But the peace was short-lived. Internal corruption, court intrigue, and external pressures combined to shatter the fragile unity. The next 3 centuries would be known as one of the most chaotic and culturally transformative periods in Chinese history, an age of shifting borders, nomadic invasions, and the coexistence of competing dynasties. The fall of Western Qin. The Qin dynasty, founded by Sima Yan, Emperor Wu of Qin, inherited the territories of the Three Kingdoms, but lacked the stability to hold them. Lavish spending and corruption drained the treasury, while powerful aristocratic families undermined central authority. The breaking point came with the War of the Eight Princes to 91 to 306 CE, a brutal civil war among imperial relatives vying for regency over a child emperor. The conflict devastated the empire's heartland, leaving it vulnerable to outside forces. The invasion of the Five Barbarians. In the early 4th century, non-Han nomadic tribes, collectively known as the Five Barbarians, Wuhu, poured into northern China. These included the Zhongnu, Ji, Xianbai, Di, and Kong peoples, many of whom had already been living within Chinese borders as frontier settlers or mercenaries. Taking advantage of Jin's internal turmoil, they seized cities, overthrew governors, and declared independent kingdoms. In 311 CE, the Zhongnu leader Liu Kang captured Luoyang, executing thousands and taking the emperor prisoner in what became known as the disaster of Yongjia. 2 years later, Chang'an fell, marking the collapse of the Western Jin. The surviving Jin court fled south to Jiankang, modern Nanjing, establishing the Eastern Jin dynasty. The 16 kingdoms, 304 to 439 CE. Northern China splintered into a patchwork of short-lived states, collectively remembered as the 16 kingdoms, ruled by a mix of nomadic and Sinicized leaders. Warfare was constant. Alliances shifted rapidly, and entire populations were uprooted by raids and forced migrations. Yet amid the chaos, cultural exchange flourished. Nomadic rulers adopted Chinese administrative systems, patronized Confucian scholars, and embraced Buddhism, which spread rapidly through the north via the Silk Road. The great Buddhist cave, temples of Dunhuang and Yonggong began to take shape during this era, blending Central Asian and Chinese artistic styles. The Eastern Jin and the South, while the North fractured. The Eastern Jin held the South, governing from Ji. The fertile Yangtze River basin became a refuge for Han Chinese aristocrats fleeing the north, bringing with them art, literature, and courtly culture. The South enjoyed relative stability and economic growth, but the Eastern Jin never regained control of the north, relying instead on defensive river-based strategies. It was during this southern era that Chinese calligraphy and landscape painting began to flourish, and poetry reached new heights, with figures like Dao Yuanming, whose verses celebrated pastoral simplicity and detachment from politics. The northern and southern dynasties for 589 CE. In 420 CE, the Eastern Jin fell to a general who founded the Lusong dynasty, the first of 4 successive southern dynasties. Meanwhile, the north consolidated under the Northern Wei dynasty established by the Xianbai people, which gradually unified the northern states. The Northern Wei undertook ambitious reforms. They promoted Sinicization, adopting Chinese surnames, language, clothing, and rituals. Land reforms redistributed fields to peasant households, strengthening the agricultural base. Monumental Buddhist projects, including the Longmen grottos, showcased both imperial power and devotion. The cultural divide between North and South deepened. The North was militarized, shaped by nomadic traditions blended with Chinese governance. The South was aristocratic, refined, and dominated by courtly intrigue. Buddhism's golden age. This era was pivotal for the spread of Buddhism in China. Monks like Kumarayiva translated key scriptures into Chinese, making Buddhist philosophy accessible to the literate elite. In both North and South, monasteries became centers of learning, art, and charity. The religion's emphasis on compassion and salvation resonated in a time of war and uncertainty. The road to reunification by the late 6th century. The Northern Zhou in the north and the Chen dynasty in the south were the final 2 powers standing. In 581 CE, the ambitious general Yang Jian seized the Northern Zhou throne, founding the Sui dynasty. Within a decade, the Sui conquered the south, ending nearly 3 centuries of fragmentation. Legacy of the era of division. Though politically chaotic, the period from 304 to 589 CE was one of profound cultural fusion. Nomadic and Han traditions intertwined, Buddhism took root, and regional identities deepened. The centuries of division left scars, but they also enriched Chinese civilization, preparing it for the new age of unity and prosperity under the Sui and Tangs. After nearly 3 centuries of division, China's fractured lands were at last drawn together under a single banner. The man who achieved this was Yang Jian, a powerful northern Zhou general of mixed Han and Xianbai heritage. In 581 CE, Yang Jian seized the throne, founding the Sui dynasty and taking the title emperor when of Sui. His reign marked the beginning of a short-lived but transformative era that would pave the way for one of China's greatest golden ages. Reunifying the realm, emperor Wen was both a skilled politician and a shrewd strategist. In 589 CE, he launched a decisive campaign against the Chen dynasty in the south. The Chen capital Jiankang fell swiftly, and for the first time since the fall of the Western Jin in 311 CE, China was united under one government. This reunification brought immense challenges. Centuries of war had left the economy weakened, infrastructure decayed, and regional identities hardened. Yet it also created an opportunity for sweeping reforms. Administrative overhaul. Emperor when centralized authority, strengthening the imperial bureaucracy and reducing the power of aristocratic clans. He implemented a 3 departments and 6 ministry system, refining the machinery of government into a model that would last through later dynasties. To ensure a steady agricultural base, he revived and expanded the equal field system, granting land to households according to their size and ability to work it. This helped curb the dominance of large landowners and increased state revenue through more equitable taxation. Legal and economic reforms. The Sui legal code streamlined Qin and Han precedents, creating a clear set of laws with fixed penalties. Emperor when also standardized coinage, stabilized grain prices, and reduced certain labor obligations, easing the burden on peasants at least in the early years. Trade began to recover as peace returned to the empire. Market towns flourished, and artisans revived industries in silk, weaving, ceramics, and metalwork. Buddhism and state support. Emperor Wen was a devout Buddhist, and under his reign, the religion enjoyed imperial patronage. Monasteries received land and exemptions from certain taxes, serving not only as religious centers but also as providers of charity, education, and medicine. This state-supported Buddhism helped bridge cultural gaps between the formerly divided North and South, offering a shared moral and spiritual framework. Emperor Yang and the Grand Canal in 604 CE. Emperor Wen was succeeded by his ambitious and extravagant son, Emperor Yang of Sui. Though often criticized for his arrogance and heavy demands on the populace, Emperor Yang oversaw one of the greatest infrastructure achievements in Chinese history, the Grand Canal. Stretching over 1,700 kilometers, the canal linked the fertile Yangtze River basin with the political heartland near the Yellow River and extended trade routes north to the frontier. It allowed grain, troops, and goods to move quickly across the empire, binding its regions more tightly together. Alongside the Grand Canal, Emperor Yang ordered the repair and expansion of roads, fortifications, and palace complexes, further displaying imperial grandeur. Military ambitions and overreach. Emperor Yang was determined to expand Sui influence beyond China's borders. He launched massive campaigns against the Korean kingdom of Goguryeo in 612, 613, and 614 CE. These invasions, however, proved disastrous. Poor logistics, harsh conditions, and determined Korean resistance led to staggering losses. Meanwhile, in the south and along the western frontier, military campaigns strained the treasury and exhausted the people. Revolt and collapse. The combination of heavy taxation, forced labor for grand construction projects, and military failures sparked widespread unrest. Peasant uprisings broke out across the empire, and provincial governors began acting independently. By 618 CE, the situation had spiraled beyond control. As Emperor Yang toured Jiangdu, modern Yangzhou, he was assassinated by his own generals. In the north, a former Sui official named Li Yuan seized the moment, marching on the capital and declaring himself the founder of the Tang dynasty. The Sui legacy, though it lasted less than 4 decades, the Sui dynasty's impact was profound. It reunited China, ending centuries of fragmentation. Its administrative and land reforms strengthened imperial governance. The Grand Canal became a lifeline of Chinese civilization for over 1,000 years. It set the stage for the Temps, whose rulers would inherit a unified, administratively efficient, and economically connected empire. The Sui's rise and fall stand as a cautionary tale. Unification and ambition can create the foundations of greatness, but overextension and disregard for the people can bring even the mightiest vision to ruin. When the Sui dynasty collapsed under the weight of overextension and rebellion, the empire was once again on the brink of chaos. Into this vacuum stepped Li Yuan, a former Sui governor with both military skill and political acumen. In 618 CE, after Emperor Yang's assassination, Li Yuan seized Chang'an, declared the founding of the Tang dynasty, and took the title Emperor Gao's. What followed was nearly 3 centuries of unity, prosperity, and cultural brilliance, a period many historians regard as the pinnacle of Chinese civilization. foundations of Temp's power. Li Yuan quickly secured the empire's core territories. But it was his son Li Shimin who would define the dynasty's early greatness. In 626 CE, Li Shimin seized power in the dramatic incident at Suanwu Gate, eliminating his political rivals and becoming Emperor Taizong. Taizong combined military genius with enlightened governance. He reformed the legal code, producing the Tang Code, a sophisticated blend of legalist structure and Confucian morality that influenced East Asia for centuries. He expanded the examination system to recruit officials based on merit, further professionalizing the bureaucracy. His armies pushed Temp's frontiers deep into Central Asia, defeating the Eastern Turks and securing the Silk Road. Chang'an, the cosmopolitan capital, the Temp's capital. Chang'an became the largest city in the world at its height, home to perhaps 1 million people. Designed on a grand grid plan, it hosted bustling markets, glittering temples, and embassies from as far as Arabia, Persia, and Byzantium. Traders brought exotic goods, spices, glassware, precious stones, while musicians, dancers, and scholars from across Asia enriched the city's cultural life. Buddhism flourished alongside Taoism and Confucianism, with great monasteries housing thousands of monks. Pilgrims like Xuanzang traveled to India to bring back sacred texts, inspiring literary and artistic masterpieces such as Journey to the West. Centuries later, the reign of Wu Zetian, one of the most remarkable figures in Tang history, was Wu Zetian, the only woman to rule China as emperor in her own right. Rising from concubine to empress, she skillfully navigated court politics, rewarded talent regardless of background, and promoted capable officials through the examination system. Her reign as the founder of the short-lived Zhou dynasty, 692–705 CE, was marked by stability and continued prosperity. Tang Xuanzong, and the height of splendor. Under Emperor Xuanzong R. 71275–6, the Temps reached its cultural zenith. Poetry flourished with giants like Li Bai, whose verses captured romantic wanderlust, and Du Fu, whose work chronicled both beauty and hardship. Painting and calligraphy achieved new heights of elegance and expressive depth. Music and dance from Central Asia influenced court performances, creating a rich cosmopolitan art scene. Xuanzong's early reign was marked by efficient governance and economic expansion. Agricultural reforms and canal networks ensured a steady food supply for the empire's growing population. The An Lushan Rebellion 755–763 CE. This golden age was violently interrupted by the An Lushan Rebellion, one of the deadliest conflicts in world history. An Lushan, a frontier general of mixed Sogdian and Turkic heritage, turned against the court, seizing both Lujiang and Chang'an. The rebellion lasted nearly 8 years, devastating the empire. Tens of millions perished from war, famine, and disease. Although the Temps eventually regained control, the central government's authority was permanently weakened. Late Temps, fragmentation and decline in the aftermath. The Temp court relied heavily on powerful regional military governors, Jidushi, who became increasingly autonomous. Corruption spread, and eunuch factions manipulated imperial succession. The empire faced further blows from natural disasters, internal revolts, and the encroachment of nomadic powers like the Tibetans and Yuas. By the late 9th century, the once mighty Temps was a shadow of its former self. The final collapse came with the Huangchao Rebellion, 874–884 CE, which ravaged the countryside and sacked both Chang'an and Luoyang. In 907 CE, the last Temps emperor abdicated, and the empire splintered into the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. The Temps legacy, despite its fall, the Temps dynasty left an enduring legacy. It set the model for cosmopolitan empire, blending Chinese tradition with global influence. Its legal, administrative, and examination systems shaped governance in East Asia for centuries. Tang, art, poetry, and urban culture remain unmatched in elegance and influence. It proved that China could be both politically strong and culturally open, embracing foreign ideas while refining its own identity. The Tang Age still stands in the Chinese imagination as a time when the Middle Kingdom was the heart of a connected world, confident, radiant, and open to all under heaven. When the Tang dynasty collapsed in 907 CE, it left behind a fractured realm. The central authority that had once radiated from Chang'an was gone, replaced by a patchwork of military strongmen, regional warlords, and ambitious governors. In the north, Dynasties rose and fell in quick succession. In the south, smaller kingdoms flourished independently, often with more stability and prosperity than their northern counterparts. This was the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period, half a century of political volatility, shifting alliances, and surprising cultural resilience. The 5 dynasties in the north. The north saw a rapid succession of short-lived regimes, each founded by powerful warlords who claimed the mandate of heaven, but rarely held it for long. Later, Liang, 907 to 923 CE, founded by Zhu Wen, a former rebel general who had played a role in Tang's final years. Harsh and mistrusted, his regime fell to invading forces from the northwestern state of later Tang. Later, Tam's 923 to 936 CE, ruled by Shatuo-Turkic warlords. It extended control over much of the north before internal betrayal led to its downfall. Later, Qin 936 to 947 CE, established with military aid from the powerful Khitan-led Liao dynasty, but heavily dependent on them, viewed as collaborators by many Chinese elites. Later, Han 947 to 951 CE, brief and unstable, brought down by coups within years. Later, Zhou 951 to 960 CE, the most competent of the 5 dynasties, initiating reforms and military strengthening. Its fall came when a rising general named Zhao Kuangyin seized power, ushering in the Song dynasty. The 10 kingdoms in the south. While the north churned through dynasties, the south and southwest were divided among 10 relatively stable kingdoms. They included Wu and southern Tang in the Yangtze Delta region, Kug in modern Hunan, Min in Fujian, southern Han in Guangdong, former Shu and later Shu in Sichuan, Wuyu in Zhejiang, famed for its maritime trade and Buddhist temples. These southern states benefited from fertile lands, thriving river trade, and less exposure to nomadic invasions. Some became centers of art, commerce, and Buddhism. Wuyu, in particular, was renowned for its peaceful diplomacy and patronage of temple construction. Life amid division despite political disunity, this era was not one of complete decline. In the south, cities grew, agriculture expanded, and maritime trade with Southeast Asia flourished. In the north, even amid war, advancements in printing, ceramics, and military organization continued. Buddhism remained a unifying cultural force, with monasteries acting as both spiritual centers and economic hubs. Regional courts often competed through patronage of poets, painters, and scholars. Foreign pressures. The Khitan-led Liao dynasty to the northeast became a dominant external power, controlling vast territories and influencing northern politics. In the northwest, Tibetan and Tangut states also vied for influence. The fractured Chinese states often had to pay tribute or form uneasy alliances to maintain their positions. The road to reunification. By the mid-10th century, it was clear that prolonged division left China vulnerable to foreign encroachment. The later Zhou, the last of the 5 dynasties, began consolidating military strength and reforming the bureaucracy. When the emperor died unexpectedly in 959 CE, his trusted general Zhao Kuangyin staged a Chen Bridge coup in 960 CE. He declared the founding of the Song dynasty, pledging to reunite the realm. Legacy of the era. The 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period proved that even in political disunity, Chinese culture could adapt and thrive regionally. It also reinforced a deep longing for national unity, which would fuel the Song dynasty's early policies. The period's instability underscored the need for a strong but broadly supported central government, one that could balance military strength with civil governance. When General Zhao Kuangyin seized power in the Chen Bridge coup of 960 CE, he inherited a realm fractured for more than half a century. Taking the throne as Emperor Taizu of Song, he vowed to reunite China, not through endless campaigns, but by blending diplomacy, strategic conquest, and administrative reform. Over the next few decades, the Song dynasty would bring peace to most of China, ushering in an era of economic brilliance, technological progress, and cultural refinement. Yet, it would also struggle with military weakness and constant threats from its northern neighbors. Reunifying the realm. Taizu's first priority was to bring the southern kingdoms back into the fold. Through a combination of negotiation and limited military action, he persuaded or subdued states like Wuyu, southern Han, and later Shu. By 979 CE, the Song had reunified most of the former Tang heartland. though control of the far north remained contested with the Khitan-led Liao dynasty. Civil over military. Determined to prevent the warlordism that had plagued the late Tang and Five Dynasties period, the early Song emperors placed the military firmly under civilian control. Senior generals were often retired with honors and pensions to ensure their loyalty. This policy strengthened central authority, but left the Song's armies less aggressive and sometimes ill-prepared for northern threats. Economic revolution. The Song period saw one of the most remarkable economic booms in pre-modern history. Agricultural advances, the introduction of fast-ripening camper rice from Vietnam, allowed multiple harvests per year, boosting food supply and population growth. Urban expansion. Cities like Kaifeng and later Hangzhou became thriving commercial hubs with bustling night markets, restaurants, theaters, and tea houses. Monetary innovation. The Song pioneered the use of paper money, jiaozi, alongside copper coins, facilitating large-scale commerce. Trade networks. Both overland and maritime trade flourished, with Song merchants reaching as far as Southeast Asia, India, and the Middle East. Technological and scientific breakthroughs. The Song era was a golden age for Chinese innovation. Printing. Movable type printing improved the spread of books and knowledge. Gunpowder, first developed in earlier centuries, it was now applied to military weapons like bombs, rockets, and primitive firearms. Navigation. The magnetic compass revolutionized maritime travel. Engineering. Advances in bridge construction, hydraulic engineering, and shipbuilding supported economic and military needs. The Liao, Western Xia, and Jin threats. The Song's northern frontier remained a constant source of tension. The Liao dynasty controlled the vital 16 prefectures, forcing the Song to sign the Chanyuan Treaty in 1005 CE, paying annual tribute to maintain peace. In the northwest, the Tangut-led Western Shire emerged, challenging Song authority along the Silk Road. Later, in the 12th century, the Jurchen-led Jin dynasty rose to power, defeating the Liao and turning on the Song. In 1127 CE, the Jin captured the Song capital Kaifeng in the Jingkang incident, taking the emperor and much of the royal family prisoner. Southern Song resilience. After the disaster of 1127, surviving members of the royal family fled south to establish the Southern Song dynasty with its capital at Hangzhou, though it controlled a smaller territory. The Southern Song maintained economic strength through maritime trade and technological innovation. Its navy became one of the most advanced in the world, using paddle-wheel ships and trebuchets to defend river and coastal cities. Culturally, the Southern Song was vibrant. Landscape painting reached new artistic heights, with masters like Fan Quan and Ma Yuan. Neo-Confucianism, championed by thinkers like Jushi, became the dominant intellectual framework, blending moral philosophy with metaphysics. The Mongol conquest. By the 13th century, the greatest threat to the Southern Song came from the rising Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan and his successors. After subduing the Jin and Western Xia, the Mongols turned their full attention to the Song. Despite fierce resistance and superior naval defenses, the Song gradually lost ground. In 1279 CE, at the Battle of Yamen, the last Song loyalist fleet was destroyed. The young emperor drowned with his court, marking the end of the dynasty. China now lay under the control of the Yuan dynasty, ruled by Kublai Khan. The Song legacy. The Song dynasty left a legacy of remarkable economic, technological, and cultural achievements. It pioneered urban lifestyles and commercial culture, centuries ahead of much of the world. It advanced science, engineering, and the arts, two levels unmatched in pre-modern history. It set administrative and educational systems, especially the imperial examination system, that shaped Chinese governance for centuries. Yet the Song's experience also underscored a recurring theme in Chinese history. A flourishing civilization vulnerable to external conquest when military power is neglected. In 1271 CE, Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, proclaimed the founding of the Yuan dynasty, declaring himself Emperor of China, although the Mongols had already conquered vast swaths of Asia. This marked the first time in history that the entire Chinese heartland would be ruled by a foreign dynasty. From their new capital at Dadu, modern Beijing, the Mongol rulers presided over an empire that was both part of a vast Eurasian network and distinct in its internal complexities. The conquest of the Song. The Mongol campaigns against the Southern Song were long and brutal. Despite the Song's advanced navy and fortified river defenses, Mongol forces combining steppe cavalry with Chinese siege engineers gradually wore them down. In 1279 CE, at the Battle of Yaman, the last Song loyalist fleet was annihilated, and the young Emperor Xiaobing perished, ending over 300 years of Song rule. With China fully under Mongol control, Kublai Khan moved quickly to consolidate his authority. Adopting a Chinese dynastic name, Yuanan, positioning himself as both the son of heaven in the Chinese tradition and the great Khan of the Mongol Empire, a multicultural empire. The Yuan court governed an empire that was ethnically and culturally diverse. The Mongols implemented a four-class social hierarchy: Mongols at the top, Simuran, various sorts, non-Chinese peoples from Central and Western Asia, Hanron, Northern Chinese and former subjects of the Jin, Nanron, Southern Chinese, former subjects of the Song. This structure privileged Mongols and foreigners over native Chinese, leading to resentment among the majority population. Government and economy: Kublai Khan retained many elements of the traditional Chinese administrative system, employing Chinese officials in civilian roles while reserving top military positions for Mongols and trusted foreigners. Economically, the Yuan dynasty integrated China into the vast Pax Mongolica, the Mongol piece that connected Eurasia from the Pacific to the Mediterranean. Paper money became the primary medium of exchange, though overprinting later caused inflation. Trade flourished along the Silk Road, bringing in glassware, gems, spices, and new technologies from the Middle East and Europe. Maritime trade expanded, with Yuan fleets reaching Southeast Asia and beyond. Cultural exchange and the West under Mongol rule, China became more accessible to foreigners than at any other time in its history. The Venetian merchant Marco Polo visited Dadu and later wrote detailed accounts of Yuan wealth, urban life, and administration. Muslim astronomers, Persian physicians, and artisans from across Eurasia served at the Yuan court, contributing to an unprecedented flow of ideas and techniques. Religion and society: the Yuan court was officially tolerant of multiple religions. Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Nestorian Christianity, and even Catholicism coexisted, each with state-recognized leaders. Tibetan Buddhism in particular gained favor under Kublai Khan, influencing court rituals and art. However, the Mongols' preference for foreign administrators and their rigid social hierarchy alienated many Chinese elites. Heavy taxation, labor demands, and forced relocations created deep social tensions, decline and crisis. After Kublai Khan's death in 1294, the Yuan dynasty faced mounting difficulties. Successive emperors lacked Kublai's leadership and vision. Factionalism and court intrigue weakened central authority. Frequent flooding of the Yellow River, combined with droughts and famine, devastated agriculture. Over-reliance on paper currency without sufficient backing led to severe inflation. In the 14th century, outbreaks of the Black Death further destabilized the empire, killing millions and disrupting trade. Rebellion and the fall of the Yuan, discontent erupted into large-scale uprisings. The most famous led by the Red Turbans, a religiously inspired movement blending Buddhist and millenarian beliefs. Among their ranks rose a former peasant monk, Zhu Yuanzhang, who proved to be a brilliant military leader. By 1368 CE, Zhu's forces captured Dadu, and the last Yuan emperor fled north into Mongolia. Zhu declared the founding of the Ming Dynasty, restoring native Chinese rule for the first time in nearly a century. The Yuan legacy: although the Yuan were relatively short-lived, they left an enduring mark on China. They expanded China's territory to its greatest extent up to that point, incorporating Tibet, Yunnan, and parts of Xinjiang. They enhanced China's connections with the wider world, fostering exchanges in science, medicine, and technology. Their reign demonstrated both the opportunities and challenges of ruling a multi-ethnic empire, yet their downfall showed the dangers of alienating the majority population and overextending imperial resources. Lessons future dynasties would remember. In 1368 CE, after decades of rebellion against Mongol rule, Zhu Yuanzhang, leader of the Red Turban forces, declared himself Hongwu Emperor and founded the Ming Dynasty. From his capital at Nanjing, he sought to restore Chinese sovereignty, revive Confucian governance, and erase the scars left by nearly a century of foreign domination under the Yuan. The Hongwu reforms: Hongwu rose from the humblest origins, a peasant orphan turned Buddhist monk, for becoming a brilliant general. His deep distrust of corrupt elites and foreign influence shaped his rule. Determined to strengthen imperial authority and prevent the military usurpations that had plagued earlier dynasties, he abolished the post of prime minister, concentrating power in the emperor's hands, expanded the civil service examination system, making mastery of Confucian classics the primary path to office, implemented strict laws to regulate officials, with harsh punishments for corruption, promoted agriculture by granting land to farmers, reducing taxes, and encouraging irrigation projects. Though these measures stabilized the empire, Hongwu's rule was also marked by suspicion and purges, with thousands of officials executed in political crackdowns. The Yongle Emperor and global ambitions in 1402, Hongwu's son, Zhu, seized the throne, becoming the Yongle Emperor. Moving the capital to Beijing, he began constructing the Forbidden City, a vast palace complex that became the heart of imperial power for centuries. Yongle's reign was also defined by outward expansion. He strengthened China's northern defenses, expanding and reinforcing the Great Wall into much of its iconic form. He launched ambitious military campaigns into Mongolia and Vietnam. Most famously, he commissioned the voyages of Admiral Zhang He, 1405 to 1433, a Muslim eunuch who commanded massive treasure fleets that sailed as far as India, Arabia, and East Africa. These expeditions showcased China's wealth and technological prowess, forging diplomatic and trade links across the Indian Ocean. Economic and cultural flourishing. The early and middle Ming period witnessed strong population growth, urban expansion, and a flourishing economy. Agricultural production soared with new crops like sweet potatoes and maize, introduced from the Americas. Domestic trade thrived through a network of canals, roads, and market towns. Porcelain production, especially the blue and whiteware from Jingdezhen, became a global luxury export. Literature and the arts flourished, with novels such as Journey to the West, Water Margin, and The Romance of the Three Kingdoms reaching their final forms. Isolation and defense. By the mid-15th century, Ming foreign policy shifted inward. Maritime expeditions were halted, and restrictions were placed on overseas trade. The government prioritized defending the northern frontier from Mongol raids, leading to continued work on the Great Wall. However, the empire's coastal defenses weakened, and piracy, often involving both Chinese and Japanese smugglers, became a persistent problem. Challenges of the later Ming period faced mounting difficulties. Court factionalism between eunuchs and scholar officials paralyzed decision-making. Economic strains arose from silver shortages, as the empire's currency relied heavily on silver imports from Japan and the Spanish colonies in the Americas. Peasant uprisings erupted due to overtaxation, corruption, and famine caused by the Little Ice Age's colder climate. On the northern frontier, the Manchu people united under strong leadership, posing a growing threat. The fall of the Ming. By the 1640s, the Ming government was collapsing under simultaneous internal and external pressures. In 1644, the rebel leader Li Ziqing captured Beijing, and the last Ming emperor, Chongzhen, hanged himself on Coal Hill, overlooking the Forbidden City. Seeking to drive out the rebels, a Ming general opened the Great Wall to the Manchus, who swiftly took the capital and established the Qing dynasty, China's last imperial dynasty. The Ming legacy. Despite its fall, the Ming dynasty left a powerful legacy. It restored native Chinese rule after foreign domination. It presided over one of the most culturally vibrant and economically dynamic periods in Chinese history. Its architectural achievements, from the Forbidden City to the Great Wall, remain enduring symbols of China's grandeur. Its literature, art, and global connections foreshadowed China's role in an increasingly interconnected world. The Ming story closes the 5,000-year arc of imperial China's rise, fall, and renewal as civilization continually reshaped by internal vigor, external challenge, and the enduring quest to balance unity, stability, and openness to the wider world.